There are some car crashes that investigators can explain immediately. Someone was drunk, someone was asleep, someone was texting, someone lost control, and then there are crashes like this one. Because in the early morning hours of July 31st, 2022, three teenagers climbed into a Toyota Camry in a quiet neighborhood in Ohio. Less than a minute later, two of them would be dead. But what made this case terrifying wasn't just the speed. It wasn't the absolute destruction. It wasn't even the fact that the car hit a brick building going exactly 100 miles per hour. It was what investigators discovered when they pulled the data from the car's computer. No skid marks, no attempt to turn, no signs of panic. In fact, the data showed the driver actually pressed down harder on the gas pedal right before impact. According to prosecutors, this was no accident. Today, we're diving into the case of Mackenzie Shirilla, a case so disturbing that it has shocked veteran investigators, devastated multiple families, and left a judge to describe the driver as a literal hell on wheels. It raises one question. What if the driver never intended for anyone to survive? To understand why this case became one of the most controversial teen crime trials in recent memory, we need to go back to the hours leading up to the impact. At the center of this story was 17-year-old Mackenzie Shirilla. To the casual observer, Mackenzie looked like a fairly typical teenager. She lived in a suburb of Cleveland, Ohio. She had friends, posted on TikTok, and went out on weekends. But according to testimony that would later emerge in court, her personal life had become an emotional powder keg, toxic and unstable. The young man at the center of that volatility was 19-year-old Dominic Russo. Dominic came from a tight-knit family. Friends described him as outgoing, funny, entrepreneurial, and deeply loyal. He and Mackenzie had been in a toxic on-again, off-again relationship that was rapidly deteriorating. The third passenger was Davion Flanagan. Davion was a competitive track athlete and a friend who was known as quiet, kind, and incredibly easygoing. On the night before the crash, the three teenagers spent time together. At first, nothing about the evening seemed out of ordinary, but prosecutors would later piece together a series of digital footprints that suggested a deep underlying friction. In the weeks leading up to that night, Mackenzie's behavior had grown increasingly threatening. Investigators later found videos on her phone where she openly threatened to key Dominic's car, and in one chilling recording, she explicitly stated, "I will crash this car by the time the sun rose next morning." Those words would become a horrific reality. It was exactly 5:30 a.m., July 31st, 2022. The roads were completely empty. Most people in the area were still asleep. The surveillance cameras from a business park in Strongsville, Ohio, captured Mackenzie's 2018 Toyota Camry turning onto Progress Drive. Inside the vehicle were Mackenzie, Dominic, and Davion. According to investigators, the Camry didn't just drive down the road. It began to accelerate aggressively, faster and faster until it reached a horrifying speed of 100 miles per hour. Now imagine that for a second. A narrow two-lane road in an industrial business park, and the sedan is flying down the road at top racing speed. The security camera captured the last second. Witnesses described the sound that didn't sound like a typical car accident. It sounded like a bomb going off. The Camry slammed directly into the concrete wall of plastics, a local manufacturing building. The impact was catastrophic. The front of the vehicle was completely crushed. Inside the vehicle, Dominic Russo and Davion Flanagan were killed instantly. Mackenzie Shirilla was pinned in the driver's seat, and she somehow survived. When responders arrived, something immediately felt wrong to veteran accident reconstructionists. Drivers panic, even in the last milliseconds before impact. Human instinct takes over. They slam on the brakes, they jerk the wheel, they try to survive. But on Progress Drive, there was absolutely no skid marks, no tire tracks showing that there was an attempt to avoid the wall. Just a straight, locked in line going straight into the concrete. Investigators began asking a horrifying question. Was this a targeted execution disguised as a car crash? For weeks, defense attorneys maintained a singular argument. This was a tragic accident, a split-second mistake by an inexperienced teenage driver who simply panicked and mistook the gas pedal for the brake. But then, the investigators cracked open the digital footprint. When the digital forensics team pulled the GPS history from Mackenzie's devices and cross-referenced it with her data log, they found something that completely changed the trajectory of the case. She hadn't just stumbled upon Progress Drive on the morning of July the 31st. The tracking data placed her in the exact same industrial park, right outside the plastics building. In the dead of night, 72 hours earlier, she had been there. For prosecutors, this wasn't just a data point. This was the smoking gun. It shattered the defense's narrative of a sudden, chaotic panic. In the eyes of the state, this data proved something far more calculated, cold, and dark. When the trial started in August 2023, Mackenzie chose to waive her right to a jury trial. This meant that her fate rested entirely on Judge Margaret Nancy Russo. The prosecutor's forensics experts replayed the car's computer data, the event data recorder, frame by frame. The telemetry was undeniable. It proved that in the final 5 seconds before impact, the steering wheel was turned slightly to the right, aiming directly to the building. And the accelerator pedal, it was pressed flat to the floor at 100% capacity for several continuous seconds on a dead-end street. She didn't freeze, she floorboarded it. While the courtroom replayed this clinical data, public fascination boiled over online. Millions of people were still debating her behavior months after the crash. While recovering from her injuries and awaiting trial, Mackenzie had attended a music festival in a wheelchair, posted videos on TikTok lip-syncing to music about death, and even posted a video saying, "I'm just a girl who a lot of people hate. I'm just a girl who a lot of people hate. But I'm not that bad of a person." Just 3 months after the car crash, she dressed up in a horror-style outfit and corpse makeup for Halloween. And she faced a major backlash. To critics online, it looked like a total lack of remorse. To her defense team, it was an erratic coping mechanism of a profoundly traumatized and immature child who couldn't mentally process the horror of what she had survived. But the prosecution argued she knew exactly what she was doing. And to prove it, they forced the court to look at the last 60 seconds of the drive. Imagine the scene inside the Toyota Camry. It is 5:29 a.m. The roads are dark and quiet. Mackenzie turns the vehicle into a short industrial dead-end street of Progress Drive. Suddenly, the nature of the drive changes. The engine revs, the digital speedometer climbs. 50, 70, 90, then 100 miles per hour. Psychologically speaking, at those speeds in a narrow road, the human brain would be screaming for survival. If it was an accident, someone would have screamed. Someone would have flinched. A foot would have lifted off the gas pedal. Instead, the accelerator remained pinned to the floor. No brakes, no swerving, a single-minded determination. A lifetime of consequences decided in a single minute. On August 14, 2023, Judge Nancy Margaret Russo delivered her verdict. She found Mackenzie Shirilla guilty on all 4 counts of murder. The courtroom immediately erupted into tears. Mackenzie sobbed as the judge handed down her decision. But it was the judge's words from the bench that became international headlines. Judge Russo looked directly at Mackenzie and said she had a mission, and she executed it with precision. The mission was death. She described Mackenzie's actions as literal hell on wheels. During the sentencing phase, the families delivered devastating victim impact statements. Davion Flanagan's mother spoke of a bright, kind young man whose life was stolen as an innocent bystander who just happened to hitch a ride. Dominic Russo's family spoke of a profound, permanent emptiness left inside their home. Mackenzie was sentenced to 15 years to life, with the possibility of parole after 15 years. Sometimes, the line between an accident, reckless behavior, and intentional destruction can be horrifyingly blurred. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to see more deeply researched, narratively driven true crime stories, please make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell. My name is Jack, and I'll see you in the next story.